It's time to prepare yourself. You are about to be triggered. Warning, this show may be too much for millennials, but that's why you should man the fuck up and watch it. Life is not always sunshine and rainbows. We have to learn to deal with uncomfortable feelings, situations, and stories. Remember, kids, if you can laugh about it, you can talk about it. In this very special episode of American Dad that I think polarized the fans more than even Blood Crieth on to Heaven did, we see Chinese zillionaire Fung buying American Dad and taking over production of the show. This is a very unsubtle satire of Chinese takeovers of American products. But moreover, this portion of the story is clearly taking a stance against investors who meddle with shows against the creator's wishes, or because they bribed the creator like Disney did with Lucas. This part of the show secludes Roger, Steve, and Haley from the main plot. Stan forgets his anniversary with Francine and commits her to a mental ward to buy time. Sounds kinda like a banal plotline, right? Maybe that's part of the whole takeover bit. A stupid story. That's all there is to it, right? It's not gonna take a dark and horrific turn, is it? Oh shit, I forgot this was American Dad, not Family Guy. See, this show is actually darker than even South Park, while being on par with South Park's level of intelligence and wit. Yes, I'll stop the circle jerk, but you better buckle the fuck up cause this is a bumpy ass ride. Kinda like taking an Uber driven by Caitlyn Jenner. No, that wasn't a joke about women drivers or trans people. That was all about the fact that Caitlyn Jenner got away with vehicular manslaughter for reasons. When Stan finally decides to pick Francine up, she has a reasonable outburst after discovering that Stan had her committed for several days. This is where the episode starts to take a dark turn. The hospital decides because of her totally reasonable outburst. After all, she was not sick, he had her committed to buy time. That would piss anyone off. Yet for getting upset for a totally reasonable reason, that results in the hospital committing her, not only against her will, but against Stan's will as well. Sorry to burst all of your bubbles, kids, but this happens for real. You could commit someone and for whatever reason decide to take them home, only to learn it's not your call anymore. Yeah, you thought you were getting voluntary help. Turns out you were giving your loved one to a prison. Now, I'll do the whole legal bit here. Not all mental health facilities are like this. There are good ones that do help many people, so I've been told. But considering this is the tip of the iceberg, maybe we'll save all that stuff for later or never. Stan decides to try and rescue Francine. He finds her drugged to oblivion and being forced to play dress-up in a stage play in the hospital's basement. Now, this exact scenario does not happen to my knowledge. I mean, people are creative and lacking morals, so it's totally possible that it happened at one point. However, this scene is standing in for the fact that showing orderlies drugging and raping the mentally ill patients would not be very funny, although somehow I think I just made it sound pretty funny. It's funny because most of you never think about the fact that it happens, not only there, but also in the old folks' homes. Yep, the places where we toss Grandma and Grandpa on their old brittle bones. They also sexually assault Mammy and Pappy there. Again, not all of them, but this time, it's most of them. Stan does stage a fairly successful rescue attempt, but then the show looks at you like Donald Trump and suddenly you feel afraid for your genitals. Unlike most episodes, Stan does not save the day here. They get tranked and captured. Now we see Stan and Francine bound up like it's time to play 50 Shades of Grey, the home game. The doctor enters and informs them because they are violent and unresponsive to medication that it's time for the last resort, a lobotomy. Side note, kids, this still happens. lobotomies are still a thing. However, modern doctors don't call them lobotomies, because they're performed with more skill than they once were. Basically, instead of destroying a large part of the brain, they destroy a specific medium portion of the brain. That's so much better, isn't it, kids? Now we see Stan realize he always figures out a way to save the day. But that's when a long drill gets rammed into his head. No one comes to save Stan. He has his brains totally fucking scrambled. Now, does it happen exactly like this in real life? No! But it's not that fucking far off either. The end of the episode, you would expect to resolve all of this. You think, okay, something else has to happen. But then Fung appears and informs us that Stan is okay, and he and Francine are now recovering at his exclusive vacation destination. The thing is, we don't see this. The last time we see Stan and Francine is when his brains are turning to mush. We don't see what happens to Francine either, but we clearly see that she was next in line. The entire Fung bits are to distract the audience from just how fucking horrific this episode is. It's funny, don't get me wrong. I love dark humor and I laughed pretty hard during this episode. But it's still a very grim and bleak one. We don't get to see Stan getting better because the fact is, no matter how safe these modern procedures are claimed to be, there is no going back from them. It's like sex with a black guy in that respect. Whether it's a fancy drill, an ice pick, or a laser, they're still destroying parts of the brain to induce a calm, passive state. Effectively, that person is now a shell. No real thoughts or feelings, just emptiness. We act like this is more humane than murder, but it's really the same thing. You may not have killed the being, but you damn sure killed the person. It is true that these extreme measures are only supposed to be used in the worst case scenario. But remember how cops are only supposed to use force as a last resort? How often is that the first one? If you're deemed unworthy of help, they just turn out the lights. It's really no better than taking the crazy fucker out back and putting 2 in his dome. We live in a country that is routinely arguing over religion, abortion, and marriage, but this is never even discussed. No wonder the aliens stopped abducting us. They probably said some shit like this. They're dissecting each other now? That takes all the fucking fun out of it, man. Screw it. Let's just go to Uranus for that gangbang with your mom and sister.